Hi, my name is Pam Taylor and I am an Adult Reference Associate at the New Lenox Public Library here in Illinois, and my specialty is genealogy. I've been doing genealogy research for not quite 30 years, so I have a few success stories and a few brick walls of my own. Today, though, I'm going to be presenting this PowerPoint presentation on quick tips for your genealogical research. So is it genealogy or is it family history? According to the Society of Genealogists, genealogy is the establishment of a pedigree by extracting evidence from valid sources of how one generation is connected to the next. And family history is a biological study of the genealogically proven family and of the community and country in which they lived. So what are we studying? What are we researching? Well, I think it's a combination of both, genealogy and family history. If you simply add birth, marriage, and death records to your genealogy, you're not getting the story of your family. It's when you add biographical information that you discover where you came from, how your ancestors lived, what they did. I have included on this slide a pedigree chart of my grandmother going back 4 generations, from my grandmother to her parents, her grandparents, and her great-grandparents. And then on the right-hand side, I have a short biography of my 7th great-grandfather, Thomas Hanaway, who married Susanna Kastner. So just to give you a little bit of a description and see the differences from a pedigree chart, which doesn't give you a lot of information, although it does give you valid information, but the story is really the biographical part that you want to enhance in your genealogical research. So I've included in these next few slides a couple of tips that I've used, and I hope that you will use them. If you don't, fine. If you have any that you would like to give to me, please feel free to email me at ptaylor@newlenoxlibrary.org, and I will be happy to add them to our collection of genealogical tips for our research. Thank you. Okay, friends, let's begin with genealogy tip number 1, where to begin. You always start with yourself. You know more information about yourself than you know about anyone else, so you need to document it. What was the name that was given on your birth certificate? Document it. What was the name given on your baptismal certificate if you were baptized? Document it. They may be the same, they may be different. Document it. Do you go by a nickname? Perhaps you go by your middle name instead of your first name. Well, people will know you by your nickname, so document it. What's your date of birth? List it. Where were you born? Were you born at home? Were you born in a hospital? Document it. Were you born in the United States or were you born in a different country? You need to document that. List your parents' names. List your siblings' names if you have any. All of that is so important. And don't forget other information, such as your education, such as your job history. Do like a little mini biography. All of that information will be so important on your family tree. Your ancestors will relish that information that you have provided. Whether it's the neighborhoods you lived in, the automobiles that you have driven, your best friends, your favorite cousins, your fondest memories. Document all of that information about yourself. It is so very important for your family history. Okay, genealogy tip number 2. Work backwards. You've gathered some really great information about yourself and have documented it. So now it's time to do the same on your parents. List your parents' full name. Do they go by a nickname? If so, document it. Document when your parents were born, the place that they were born. Do you know if they were born in the United States or were they possibly born in a different country? Document it. Document the date that they were married and the place that they were married. Were they married in a church or were they married in a city hall? Document it. Do you have a copy of their marriage license? Or do you have a copy of their wedding certificate? If so, document it. And also, which is really great, is if you have a copy of that, scan it into your computer and then you have it forever on your family tree. Were your parents married before? If so, document it. Do you have any step brothers, sisters, half brothers, half sisters? Document it. Then work backwards another generation to your grandparents. That's right, your mom's parents and your father's parents. Do the same diligent research so that you have your grandparents' names and possibly nicknames. Do you have a copy of their marriage certificate? The place that they were married? The date that they were married? How about any of their children? All of that information is so important. Document it. Document your parents' occupations, what they did for a living. Were they teachers? Were they auto workers? Were they doctors, nurses? Did they work for the railroad? There's all kinds of records that are available. The same thing for your grandparents. Document what they did for a living. It's important to have birth records, marriage records, death records. But those records only tell you a little bit of your history. What you want is a story. You want to know what your ancestors did for a living. Where did they live? What were they involved in? Were they farmers? Were they important in their community? Were they politically active? Any of that information tells you a story. It tells you a family history. Birth, marriage, and death records just give you dates. But what you want for your history, you want stories that you can dig into, whether from historical societies, from secrets in the attic, treasures in the attic. That tells you a story, your family story. So all of that is worth investigating and worth documenting. Remember, always work backwards. Every generation back that you go doubles. You have 2 parents. You have 4 grandparents. You have 8 great-grandparents. 16 great-great-grandparents. 32 great-great-great-grandparents. So you can see you have a lot of information to gather. A lot of information that is so wonderful to add to your family tree and to tell you where you came from. So gather as much as you can. You can never have enough, never have enough. There's always more to find. So good luck. Genealogy tip number 3, death certificates. Death certificates are a vital record. They can usually be obtained from the county clerk's office, and there's usually 2 different forms. One could be a certified copy of a death certificate, which is generally used for insurance policies and probate records. And the other is a genealogical copy, which is the exact same copy, except it's not certified. A death certificate will include the deceased name, the age at death, if known, the cause of death, the exact time of death. If the deceased is a female, it may include her maiden name. If the deceased is married, it may include the surviving spouse name. It will include the date and place of the deceased, if known. The name of the parents of the deceased, again, if known. It will include the deceased occupation, or if they were retired. And it will include the name and location of the cemetery where the deceased remains are placed. So I have included a copy of my great-grandmother, Eva Bell Hanaway's death certificate from Indiana. And you'll notice that it indicates her name is Eva Bell Hanaway. However, her middle name, Bell, is misspelled. It should be B-E-L-L-E, the same as her mother. It indicates that she died on 4/26/1956, which is correct. It lists that she was a female, she was white, and she was widowed. All of that information is correct. It lists her date of birth is 12/11/1882. That is incorrect. Her date of birth was actually 12/11/1881. It lists her father's name as Isaac Senesac. That is incorrect. Her father's name was Theophilus Deneau. However, Theophilus Deneau died 3 months before Eva Bell was born. When she was 8 years old, her mother, Belle Boudreau, remarried Isaac Senesac. So Isaac Senesac was actually Eva Bell's stepfather. It also indicates that she died of bronchial pneumonia and that she suffered it for 1 day. It indicates that she was buried in Wheatfield Cemetery, which is correct. She is buried there. So much of this information is accurate. However, keep in mind, the informant was Mrs. Bernice Ebsen, my great aunt. And when a loved one passes away and you are required to provide information to the funeral director or the coroner regarding the deceased personal information, it can be a very emotional time for that person, and they may not be thinking clearly. And that is why sometimes information on death certificates is not accurate information, such as in this case, the date of birth, which is incorrect, and the father's name, which is incorrect. So just be knowledgeable of that possibility and do your research so that you do have accurate information. And then that's what you document, because death certificates can have inaccurate information strictly by no fault of the provider, but just because of an emotional time. Good luck. Genealogy tip number 4. Visit a genealogy library. I have listed 5 of my favorite genealogy libraries that I access pretty regularly. The first one I'm going to talk about will be the Newberry Library and Genealogy and Local History section right here in Chicago, Illinois. If you've never been to the Newberry Library, please bring in a driver's license or a Illinois state ID or some state ID or driver's license and obtain a free reader's card so that you have access to their genealogy collection and resources. Some of the resources that the Newberry offers are terrific ethnic pathfinders, which will give you resources, databases that you can access for Polish genealogy, Italian genealogy, German genealogy, Russian genealogy, and many, many more. They have over 17,000 published genealogies. They have a massive collection of local histories, military records, They cover colonial America, New England, Canada, the Midwest and Mid-Atlantic states. They really have a vast collection of resources available, including city directories and census records. Also, if you cannot go to the Newberry Library and you need some help, feel free to contact one of the librarians with your question. And normally it takes several weeks to get an answer, but they will respond. And if they don't, ask them again. I've been very lucky that I've had several of my questions responded to in a timely fashion. Allen County Public Library is a great resource in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They have excellent family genealogies. They have a massive collection of Indiana resources. If you have any Hoosier relatives, Allen County is definitely the library to visit. They have the Percy periodical collection, and many times they will accept your genealogies, your family history, if you have put it in a family tree format and send it to them. They will accept that and add it to their collection, which is a great resource for those of us looking for family histories and may not see something in a regularly published book or journal or periodical. You might find something that was self-published and Allen County may have it on their shelf. The Mid-Continent Public Library is located in Independence, Missouri, and they have another great resource for oral histories. And they have a fantastic family collection, a huge cemetery collection. Well, one of the cemeteries is a great big one, is Woodlawn in Missouri. A lot of their resources are digitized, so they may not have the actual document there. It may be in one of the local historical societies, but they have a lot of digital resources available. The South Suburban Genealogical and Historical Society, located right here in Hazel Crest, Illinois, is one of my favorite resources. They have a huge Pullman collection, city directories. They have burial records from especially the Oak Forest Cemetery that many people don't know about. It's actually in Cook County. It's the furthest cemetery in Cook County, Illinois. They offer a lot of resources, tons and tons of books in their library. They have city directories, like I said, and a lot of local history. And the last one is obviously the Library of Congress, which is located in Washington, D.C., which many of us can't get to. But if you go to their website and type in genealogy, again, you will be astounded with all the information that they have, or where they can direct you to where the actual information is. So don't hesitate to check out one or all of these genealogy libraries. They're great resources for anyone doing family history and genealogy. Genealogy tip number 5, neighbors. On the 1900 federal census for Jasper County, Kenner Township in Indiana, on page 7, I found my great-grandfather, Bert Hanaway. He was listed as a servant for a farmer. On page 15 of that same exact census, I found Eva Senesac, whose real name was Eva Belle Deneau. She was living with her stepfather, Isaac Senesac, and her mother, Belle Boudreau Deneau Senesac. So I found out how my great-grandparents met, which was pretty enlightening to me because I didn't know. They were married in January of 1901. So by locating a neighbor, you might be able to find your relative on another census record. They may still be living with, or not with, but they still may be living close to a neighbor. Many times Many times our ancestors who came to this country stayed in close proximity to those that they arrived with when they came to the United States. That is especially true for my Polish relatives and my German relatives who settled in Chicago. They stayed in close proximity to each other on, say, for instance, the 1880 census, the 1900 census, the 1910 census, and the 1920 census. So you may want to check those other census records. If you can't find your relative, look for a neighbor that they were close to for some time. Good luck. Genealogy tip number 6. Organize your genealogy. There are many different methods that you can use to organize your genealogy. One method that works for me may not work for you. So you may want to try different methods initially. There's programs, online programs such as Ancestry and Family Search that you can use. You can insert your family history information directly onto those websites where it will stay. And you can make changes, you can update the information, you can add and delete as you desire. However, keep in mind that when you use Ancestry and Family Search, there are conditions that will apply. Then there's software programs such as Family Tree and Magic Roots, both of which I've used, and there's other ones out there also that you can purchase and download to your computer where you can add your family history, you can add your photos, you can add your source documents, and then you control all of the information that is on those programs that you've downloaded. You can control whether you publish it online or whether you keep it private, that you do not publish. You can create genealogy charts, you can create pedigree charts, you can create ancestral charts and family trees. Another method that you can use would be manila folders. And when you're using manila folders, you can use one for each surname. However, keep in mind if you have many males with that surname. For instance, like in my example here, I have a Thomas who married an Elizabeth Hanaway. I have a Thomas who married a Susanna Kastner. I have a Jacob who married a Martha, another Jacob who married an Eliza, another Jacob who married an Esses Marilda. What you'd want to do on those manila folders would be to indicate on the outside of the folder the husband's name, the wife's name, and I would include her maiden name, if known, and their children, all of their children's names. And then when you have all your folders, you may want to keep them in either alphabetical order or date order. You can see that I do not use manila folders because each of my family, each of these generations that you see here, each of them had many children, and the folders were so full that they were not easily organized, or I couldn't keep them organized. So I decided to put them in binders, which I find work very well for me. But again, you have to have the place to store the binders. Each one of your folders or binders, whichever you use, should include a family group sheet. It should include a pedigree chart. It should include research logs, which would include your dates that you've done the research, whether you found the information you were looking for or you still need to look for it, and you would cite your sources. It would also include photocopies of the source documents that you've obtained, whether those are vital records, copies of census records, wills, city directories, property deeds, land surveys, etc. Now, in my binders, I have them divided by census, marriage, children, land, property, military. I have a number of subcategories so that each one is the same. And I find it a very simple program or very simple method for me to use. The key to this, the key to organizing your genealogy is to please keep it simple. Again, what works for me may work for you. It may not work for you. Manila folders may work for you. Binders may work for you. An online program may work best. A software program might work best for you. Just remember, use a program, use a method that will work for you and that you will continue to use in the future. Okay? Good luck. As long as we're talking about organization of your genealogy, I'm going to give you another genealogy tip in that same realm, and that's genealogy tip number 7, creating a research log or using a notebook. And there's several forms that can help you document what you've researched and what you need to use. And one of those is a research log. And a research log is simply a document that's available for free on a number of websites, Ancestry, Family Search, there's Pinterest, there's a lot of research logs out there. And it's simply a document that's used to plan your research. It lists what you want to find. It documents the sources that you've searched and used and the results that you found in your findings. For instance, a number of years ago, I went to the IRAD location right here in Chicago, the Northeastern University, and I was looking for some divorce records for my great-great-grandparents, Katharine and Charles Ball. And I knew from the IRAD location, their catalog, that they had some microfilm and some books that might help me locate this divorce record. Although I wasn't sure they were divorced, but I wanted to eliminate that possibility. So I searched all day long, and I used a research log and documented every reel of microfilm that I searched, every book, every journal, every document that I looked at, so that, and I listed my findings, which unfortunately were none. But I don't look at it that I was unsuccessful in finding their divorce records. I look at it that I was successful in eliminating those possibilities that the divorce records were not there. So it's just a way of documenting your findings, whether you found something or whether you didn't. A research extract is another document which simply summarizes information which sometimes can't be photographed or scanned, such as probate records. Many times probate records are quite lengthy, and they could be very time-consuming to read. They could be very expensive to copy. So what you may decide to do is simply read the probate record where you're at and simply document the area in which you can obtain the information that you're looking for. And that you're documenting that particular source so that you don't have to reread it, you don't have to spend the money to copy it, but that you have the information that you need quickly at hand. So you use a research extract form. Again, that form I found on Ancestry.com, and you can download it for free. A research calendar gives you an account of each record source that you have searched. And it reminds us of the research that we've completed or that we need to complete with the date. So that when you look at it, you say, oh gosh, I thought I did that, and you discover, no, you didn't. Or, oh yes, I did do that. A research calendar is really effective. For instance, I obtained a copy of some naturalization record for one of my Polish ancestors through the National Archives here at the Great Lakes location. And I forgot to list it, that I had it. So one day I was thinking, gosh, you know what, I think I could really use his naturalization. I found it, so I requested it again. Had I listed it on my research calendar, I would have known that I had it and I didn't need to spend the money for an additional copy. Lesson learned. Correspondence calendars are very effective in when you're contacting, whether it's archives or a relative, a library, and you're documenting the date that you have contacted a library, archive, or whoever, and what your request was, and then whether or not you received a response. Sometimes when you contact archives or relatives, they may not be quick in responding, and you may need to contact them again. So if you have a correspondence calendar, you'll know if you've done that or if you need to do it again. A notebook. This idea was given to me by a friend of mine, Peg, and what she has done when she goes to an archive or a genealogy library or a conference or whatever, she uses a notebook with information regarding her family, and she has divided it by a person's name. Whether it's, like, she'll have one surname for the book, and then she's divided it by people. And she may be looking for immigration records. She may be looking for a marriage record or a burial record. And this notebook will provide her with that information without dragging in a big binder or her computer or her tablet. And here she just has this information, and she can cross out what she has found and what she needs to keep searching for, instead of bringing all this other material with you when you go to these locations to complete your research. So, just another suggestion. Genealogy tip number 8, newspapers. Newspapers are an absolutely great resource to discover your family history and the family stories. You can find not only marriage announcements, but birth announcements, obituaries, family stories in the social section, announcements of family reunions, church celebrations, political activities, and, of course, crime. Not all newspaper articles are available on paid subscription sites such as newspapers.com and genealogybank.com. Those are paid subscriptions. Look for the free newspapers that may be digitized or may be available on microfilm or microfiche. For instance, I was fortunate enough maybe 15 years ago to discover one of my great uncles was involved in a crime down in Florida, and his obituary, the cause of death was blacked out. So I knew right away that there was something that had happened, and I thought, well, I'll go to the newspaper. Maybe the newspapers will have something on it. Well, I hit the pay dirt because it was front page that there was a murder and a suicide, and my uncle was the main character in that crime. I was fortunate enough to find the newspaper available from the state library on interlibrary loan, the microfilm. They sent it to the New Lenox Library, where we have a microform reader, and I was able to look at the article, copy it, and send the microfilm back to the Florida State Library. And so I have a great resource available, but it took a little bit of hunt and peck. So don't hesitate to really have the patience of a saint and look for those family stories. You'll see from the examples on this page, I listed a Philip Sommer when he was marrying his little sweetheart, Katharine O'Connor, and his parents and her parents were both not in favor of this marriage, and it hit the social column in the newspaper. Unfortunately, the parents may have been a little bit right, because the marriage only lasted about 4 years. In the center, I have an obituary of my great-great-grandfather, Ludwig Sawicki, and I obtained this obituary from a Polish newspaper here in Chicago. And whoever wrote this obituary did an excellent job. Not only did they tell me where he lived, when he was born, when he died, what he died of, but it gave me the name of his wife with her maiden name. It gave me the name of his children with the name of their spouses. It gave me the name of the number of grandchildren he had. It named his siblings. It was an absolutely great obituary. Next to that, you have a social column about a Hanaway reunion. This one was held in 1956 in Indiana, and we still hold that reunion to this day, although the 2020 reunion was canceled due to COVID-19, which will make the papers next year. In the upper right-hand corner, I have a marriage announcement of my great-great-grandmother, Alma Ball, to her first husband, Philip Hirschberg. You could say she got married the day the circus came to town, because he was a theatrical agent and she was a participant in the Golmar Brothers Circus that was in St. James, Minnesota on May 28th, the day that they got married. Under that, I have the marriage announcement of William Sibbett to Mary Hanaway. They were married in April of 1880, and the following year, unfortunately, Mary and William's baby boy passed away from brain fever, and 2 weeks later, Mary died of brain fever too. So you can find a lot of great information and sometimes sad information through newspapers, and you just have to be very diligent in your research. You just have to be patient. Don't be afraid to reach out to archives, state libraries, local libraries, and ask them if they have these newspapers on microfilm, or if they'd even make a copy of an article for you, if possible. So good luck in your research. Genealogy tip number 9, using timelines. If you haven't used a timeline on one of your ancestors that you're having difficulty finding information on, I would highly suggest doing so. On this slide, you will see a timeline I created on my great-great-grandmother, Katharine Sommer Ball. Okay, I know for a fact that Katharine was born in 1849 because I have a copy of her baptismal records from Germany. Okay, and I go all the way through 1923 with information that I have in hand. Okay, whether it's an immigration record, a marriage certificate, the birth certificate of my great-grandmother Alma Ball. I found Katharine on city directories, and I have a copy of her death certificate from 1923. So timelines can help us identify problems. They can help us identify holes in our research. It puts our ancestor in a particular place in history. And in Katharine's timeline, it helps me summarize her life. And it puts it in chronological order. So timelines can also divide an ancestor's life from childhood into marriage, and then obviously into old age. And very important, it helps us discover discrepancies. So I would highly suggest creating a timeline for one of your ancestors that you're having difficulty with. And in fact, I did a presentation on creating your own timeline, and you would be surprised how many people cannot remember things that have happened in particular years. If you started from the year that you were born until the current year, which I would hope you would mark COVID-19, you would be surprised. I would add your education to a timeline. I would add your homes, where you've lived, your occupations that you may have been involved in. anything of interest, your children, your marriages, anything of interest. I would definitely suggest using timelines. They are an important resource for doing your genealogy research. Good luck. Genealogy tip number 10, genealogical and historical societies. I cannot emphasize enough how much you need to reach out to area genealogical and historical societies in the community that you're researching. For instance, we have in New Lenox, we have our New Lenox Area Historical Society, the Lockport Area Genealogical and Historical Society, South Suburban Genealogical and Historical Society, Kankakee Valley Genealogical Society, Chicago Genealogical Society, of course the Chicago Historical Museum, which has a wealth of information and an excellent library, and the Illinois State Genealogical Society. All of these societies and historical societies offer us a wealth of information. They can have church records, census records, local histories, military obits, school histories and sometimes school records, ancestor books, county and township maps, plat of surveys, area photographs, cemetery records. They have so much information that may not be digitized and available online. So that's why you need to reach out to these societies, whether via email or write a letter. Many times you may be asked to join, and these societies are asking for just a very minimal fee, anywhere from $5 to $25 for 1 year membership. So I would highly suggest reaching out to these organizations, even if it's just for a simple question. You may discover that you can find so much more information on your ancestor simply by asking or writing that letter. Good luck. Genealogy tip number 11, genealogy programs, webinars, conferences. Well, friends, most of you know that we have a monthly genealogy program at the New Lenox Public Library where we try to present programs that are interesting for our genealogists. We could talk about databases, we can talk about migration, we can talk about ethnicities. We bring in special presenters, or sometimes I just create a program of my own that I think may be interesting to the group. So a lot of libraries do have genealogy programs. You don't necessarily have to be a member of that particular library to attend, but check them out. Check out those libraries. Always check out the New Lenox Library, because even though we're not meeting now because of COVID-19, we will again resume those programs as soon as possible. Don't forget to check out state and county genealogy conferences. Again, due to COVID-19, a lot of them are canceled or they're just planning on 2021 conferences. But you can gain so much information from attending those conferences and picking out the programs that you want to attend, whether it's a one-day conference or a three-day conference or a week-long conference like Roots Tech that's held in Utah. Right now there are a great deal of free webinars online. Family Tree Legacy has a group of webinars that I've been watching. FamilySearch.org has free webinars. Ancestry.com has webinars. There's so many webinars and podcasts that you can participate in, especially right now when so many libraries are closed to the public. So reach out to those. Most of everything I've been watching has been free. I haven't had to pay any fee for any of these webinars. You may be asked to pay for a class. A lot of these family tree and ancestry have classes that you can pay and subscribe to, but I just attend the webinars. So reach out for those, and you'll be surprised at what you can learn. Good luck. Genealogy tip number 12, check out cemeteries. What do you do when you are unable to find an ancestor's place of burial? There are a number of resources that hopefully can help you with this quest. Obviously, the death certificate would be the first place to look if one was created. Keep in mind that death certificates were not required until the early part of the 20th century for most of the United States. Not all, but most of the United States. So that would be a good place to start. The second would be the cemetery office. You may want to try to talk to the sexton or the person in charge. Calling the cemetery first is usually a really good idea to see if a real person could help you. Most of the time I do believe that they do try to be very helpful. The third place would be funeral home records. Although not very common, you may check with the local town or county of the funeral home records for your ancestor. Sometimes funeral homes keep records that are available. Otherwise, you may try a state archive, because state archives may have transcribed records from funeral homes and put them in their collection. Or you may check with a university library. They may have transcribed funeral home records in their special collections. So that's another resource that you might want to try. You could ask family members. You could ask your extended family members. Maybe your great aunt or great uncle or third cousin may know of a place of burial, or may know where the old family homestead was. And perhaps on the old family homestead there is a family burial ground where family members may have been buried when they passed away. Church cemeteries. If you're aware of the church that your ancestor attended, you may be fortunate in finding a burial at their church cemetery. Not always, but sometimes. I have an ancestor that's buried in a church cemetery up in Lublin, Wisconsin, in Taylor County. Local genealogy societies. This is really helpful. I was very fortunate in finding the burial ground of Susan Allman, one of my cousins, who died as an infant, but she was buried in a Cook County cemetery in Oak Forest. And when I went to St. Gabriel's Cemetery, there are no markers. There's supposed to be thousands of graves, but no markers. So I contacted the Oak Forest Hospital because it's right on their grounds, and unfortunately they didn't have the resource, but they told me to contact the South Suburban Genealogical Society, and they did have the information. So I was very fortunate in finding that information from a genealogy society. Find a Grave. I'm pretty sure we are all familiar with Find a Grave and Billion Graves. These are both online databases that are available to everyone. Find a Grave is free. Billion Graves has a subscription fee for certain collections or certain cemetery records. So hopefully these resources will help you. If not, don't forget to contact local libraries. If you are familiar with where your relative lived, if they lived in Rensselaer, Indiana, and you can't find their burial, you know that they died somewhere around the area, but you can't find their place of burial, contact the local library and see if they have any kind of records, or maybe they could put you in touch with a local genealogist who may be able to steer you in the right direction as well. Okay, good luck. Genealogy tip number 13, ask your relatives questions. Sometimes we may have relatives that we just don't have a lot of information on. For instance, I have an Uncle Homer who I did know as a child. He died when I was young, and he was single, and he was a very hard-working veteran, and then he farmed. He owned some property in Indiana, and he farmed. And he never married, but he was so nice, and I often wondered why he didn't marry. And at one of our family reunions, one of my cousins told me after Homer had passed away that Homer had wanted to marry one of the neighbor girls when he was young before he went into service, and her parents did not allow the marriage. And he was heartbroken because she was the love of his life. And in the end, she had married someone else, and then that person passed away. And at the end of Homer's life, his first love came and cared for him, and they were very close at the end, which I never knew. I never knew that story, and so it's one of the stories that I've documented. So reach out to your relatives and ask them questions, and ask them about stories that they could share about relatives that maybe you're not that familiar with. The other suggestion would be to look in your attics. Look in your relatives' attics, or ask if they have any treasures that might be up there. After my mother had passed away, the first Christmas, my sister and I went up into my attic because there was a box marked of Grandma's china, my mother's china, and I thought it would be nice to use Grandma's china for our Christmas dinner. It was the first Christmas that we didn't have my mom. So we went up into the attic, and we opened the box marked china, and it was not china at all. In the box were cards and report cards, little gifts that we had made my mother when we were children, pot holders and aquarium, stone, craft art, letters that we had written to my mother when we were younger. Absolutely a treasure chest of treasures from my mother at the very moment we needed them the most, in a box simply marked china. So don't hesitate to look in those attics and look in those old photo albums and those old boxes, because you never know exactly what you may or may not find and what you may or may not consider a family treasure. Good luck. Genealogy tip number 14, social media. Social media is a great way to connect with people. It's a form of crowdsourcing, which you can pose questions on social media to answer some of those tough questions that you are having difficulty finding the answer to. Blogs, boards, posts, pins are a great way to share information and learn. Facebook, you can create your own surname page, so only your family members that you invite can participate on that Facebook page. We have one for my family that we have posted information on our reunion, and family information, genealogy, a lot of photos, but only family members invited can participate on that page. It's not open to the public. Twitter is a great one, Instagram, Pinterest. Pinterest is always fresh. There's always new features. It's kind of like a modern day pin board that people post little notes, and it's just, I especially like it for genealogy because I always like the genealogy images and the genealogy quotes. But there's also some great resources for cemeteries and brick walls and all kinds of interesting articles on Pinterest. What Was There is a great social media. You can have a picture taken from 1920 and then kind of superimpose a picture from now into the same area and see and like superimpose it so that it looks like it was 1920 and then 2020. So it's pretty interesting, that social media. So one suggestion that I would give you is to use only one email for only just your social media, so that you have no contacts out there that could possibly hack into your private email account. I was hacked into from Facebook years ago, and I definitely changed my email address so that now on social media I only use one email address, and there's no contact, so that I don't ever get any email, or I don't ever respond if somebody should send me something, and that way I can hopefully not ever be hacked again on social media. So good luck. It's definitely worth pursuing. Social media has some great resources out there and great questions, and people are usually very willing to help you or offer their opinions too. So good luck. Genealogy tip number 15. Don't quit. Whatever you do in your research, your genealogy research, don't give up. You may want to put it aside for a while and come back to it later, but don't ever give up. You are the family historian. You are the one who's going to gather the information and document it and keep it for generations to come. You want to collect those stories, collect those facts, and share them, document them and share them. And yes, you may run into brick walls, and you may never get all the answers, because we never can ever have enough information. There's always more information to gather. You can always go back another generation, another surname, branch of your family tree. But never ever give up. If you have any questions, problems, brick walls, reach out. Reach out to those genealogists. Reach out to fellow genealogists. Reach out to genealogy organizations. Reach out to librarians. We are always happy to help you with any questions that we may be able to answer, and if we can't answer them, we try to give you the resources to pursue to find those answers. Check out those libraries and archives and historical societies and journals and magazines and databases, and dig into the dirt. Make sure you make trips to cemeteries and local historians. Talk to those people, because they have a wealth of information that genealogists are almost always willing to share. So good luck. And if you ever need any help, feel free to email me at ptaylor@newlenoxlibrary.org, and I will do my very best to help you or steer you in the right direction. Thank you.